The first sound I remember from that day was not the organ music, not the priest's voice, not even the whispers of condolences that floated like moss in the dim light. It was silence. A silence so thick, so suffocating, it pressed against my chest harder than the black dress I had forced myself into that morning. I had thought the dress would strangle me, the high collar, the heavy fabric, the way it clung as though it knew I was drowning inside. But no, it was the silence that nearly crushed me. They tell you that funerals are for closure, but I don't think whoever coined that phrase ever truly buried someone they loved. Closure? That's a polite word people use when they want you to stop crying in public. When they want to tidy grief into neat packages, tie it with a bow of platitudes, and shove it where it won't make them uncomfortable. But grief isn't neat. It isn't polite. It's jagged, unruly, and it clings. And on that day, it clung to me so fiercely I could hardly breathe. I sat in the front row, hands folded in my lap like a schoolgirl waiting for punishment. The coffin lay just a few feet away, draped in flowers so bright they looked garish against the dull oak. Red roses, white lilies, sprays of baby's breath, arrangements ordered by people who thought beauty might soften death. It didn't. Behind me, the church was full. Neighbors, distant relatives, business partners ID only ever seen in passing, their dark suits blending together like one endless shadow. Some faces looked genuinely mournful, others merely curious, and some wore that thin veil of respect that barely masked relief. Relief that it wasn't their turn. I could feel eyes on me, heavy, searching, prying. What will she do? They wondered. Will she weep? Will she faint dramatically into someone's arms? Will she reveal something, some secret they could whisper about later? I did none of those things. I sat still. I said nothing. Because what could I possibly say? How could I stand there and confess that? The man in that coffin, the man everyone was mourning, had left me with more questions than answers. That his death had opened not just a wound, but a door. A door I wasn't sure I wanted to walk through. Because there was one truth I hadn't shared. Not with the priest. Not with the mourners. Not even with our children. The inheritance. $28 million. I could almost hear the figure echoing in the silence, though no one else knew. It sat heavy in my mind like a forbidden word, one I dared not whisper aloud. That morning, before the funeral, I had discovered the documents, neatly tucked away in his office safe. Deeds, accounts, transfers, hidden trails of wealth that had never once surfaced during our marriage. My husband had been many things, stern, secretive, often distant, but poor was never one of them. Still, I hadn't imagined this. $28 million. And not a word of it had been left in the will they had read to me 2 nights ago. The official will had spoken of modest savings, the house, a few investments that would cover expenses, but nothing extravagant. Enough to live, not enough to thrive. That had seemed right, believable, but the hidden files told a different story. The real story. So there I sat, staring at a coffin while the church hummed with grief, carrying the weight of a secret so vast it made the flowers smell like rot. The service droned on. Words of comfort, words of faith. I heard none of them. My mind kept circling the same thought. Who else knows? Because surely, money like that does not stay buried forever. My husband must have trusted someone, an accountant, a partner, perhaps even a confidant I never knew existed. Someone had to have moved the numbers, signed the papers, built the scaffolding of his hidden fortune. And if I had found it, accidentally, in the quiet of his office, then what of those who had been searching? The thought sent a chill down my spine. I remembered the faces that had lingered too long when they approached me. A neighbor's handshake that felt rehearsed. A cousin's eyes that slid from me to the coffin and back again, calculating. The woman 3 rows behind me, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue, her expression more curious than mournful. Had they guessed? Had they been waiting for this moment? I folded my hands tighter, nails pressing crescents into my palms. I could not tell them. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. Because once the word inheritance slipped from my lips, it would no longer be mine. It would become theirs, their speculation, their greed, their hunger. And I wasn't ready to feed anyone. After the final hymn, after the priest's benediction, we filed out into the pale afternoon. The air smelled of rain, though the sky held back its tears, unlike the mourners around me. People pressed close, offering condolences like coins dropped into an empty cup. "I'm so sorry for your loss. He was such a strong man. If you need anything at all, please don't hesitate." Empty words. Words spoken by people who already had one foot back in their own lives. I nodded, thanked them, even smiled once or twice, though it felt like my face might crack. All the while, the silence grew louder inside me. That silence where my confession should have been. When the line of sympathizers thinned, I finally saw her. Standing at the edge of the crowd, watching me. Her dress was simple, black like the rest, but she wore it with a grace that made the others look overdressed, overdone. Her hair was pulled back, her face calm, too calm. She didn't step forward, didn't offer condolences, didn't even pretend to wipe a tear. She only watched. Our eyes met, and for a moment, it felt as though she could see straight into me. Straight past my stiff smile, my polite nods, my silence. Straight to the $28 million I was hiding in my chest. And then, as if satisfied, she turned and walked away. I don't know how long I stood there, staring after her. Long enough that someone touched my arm and asked if I was all right. I lied, of course. Said I was simply tired. Said grief was heavier than I expected. But inside, my thoughts screamed. Who was she? And what did she know? That night, the house was unbearably quiet. The children were asleep in their old rooms, guests gone, dishes washed. I sat at my husband's desk, the documents spread before me like a crime scene. Account numbers, wire transfers, offshore holdings in places ID only ever heard about on the news. And then, one name. The same name again and again, scrawled in the margins of contracts and typed neatly into footnotes. A beneficiary, perhaps. Or a partner. I whispered it aloud, though it felt dangerous to give it voice. The name of the woman I had seen at the funeral. The name glared at me from the paper, sharp as though the ink were still wet. I ran my finger over it again and again, hoping my eyes were deceiving me. They weren't. The same name appeared across different documents, tucked into footnotes, circled in margins, attached to transfers. Not in bold, not obvious, but always there, like a watermark. Clara Vance, the woman at the funeral. The woman who had watched me from the edge of the crowd with that unnervingly calm gaze. I leaned back in the chair, the leather groaning under my weight, and stared at the ceiling. My husband had hidden money, millions of it. But why did her name, of all names, run like a thread through the fabric of it all? I wanted to believe it was coincidence. A lawyer's assistant, maybe. An accountant's signature. Someone peripheral. Someone forgettable. But nothing about Clara Vance was forgettable. The night stretched thin, the grandfather clock in the hallway tolling out hours I didn't feel. I should have been exhausted. Grief and formality had drained me all day, but adrenaline pumped through my body as though I had drunk a pot of coffee. Every tick of the clock deepened the silence. Every shadow seemed to lean closer, listening. At last, I gathered the documents and slid them back into the safe, locking the dial with trembling hands. My husband's office smelled faintly of him, ink, leather, a trace of cigar smoke that lingered despite my attempts to scrub it from the curtains months ago. I shut the door quickly, as though that would trap the ghost inside. But the ghost followed me to bed. I lay awake, the mattress fast and unfamiliar without his weight beside me, my mind circling like a moth around fire. Clara Vance. Who was she to him? And who was she to me now? Morning came with an edge. The house hummed with quiet activity, my children stirring, the kettle whistling, the ordinary rhythms of life daring to resume. I moved among them in silence, pouring tea, buttering toast, smiling when expected. But my thoughts were elsewhere. I needed answers. And I knew where to begin. The funeral had left behind more than flowers and condolences. It had left behind whispers. I remembered fragments of conversation as people lingered near the church steps. A man's low voice, "She showed up after all these years?" A woman's response, clipped, strange timing, "Don't you think?" They hadn't been speaking about me. They'd been speaking about her. Clara. So she wasn't just a stranger in a black dress. She was someone people recognized. Someone tied, however tenuously, to my husband. I started with the simplest path, his old address book. A worn leather-bound book with pages filled in his steady handwriting. Names, numbers, addresses. Most were outdated, relics from a time before cell phones stored everything in invisible clouds. I flipped through carefully, not knowing what I hoped to find. And there it was, between Valentine, Roger, and Vernon, Teresa. Vance, Clara. No number. No address. Just a name. As though that alone was enough for him. I shut the book and sat very still. So she wasn't just part of the money. She was part of him. The rest of the day passed in fragments. Visitors dropped by, neighbors with casseroles and clumsy sympathy. I accepted it. All with polite nods, but inside, my resolve was hardening. By evening, when the last casserole had been shoved into the fridge and the last visitor waved from the driveway, I finally allowed myself to act. I picked up the phone. The local directory was no help, too many Vances, none with the name Clara. So I turned to the modern oracle, the internet. A dozen searches later, I found her. A professional photograph. Crisp, polished. The same face I had seen at the funeral, though younger, less shadowed. Her name was attached to a consulting firm. Financial advisement. Wealth management. Offshore holdings. My stomach dropped. She hadn't just known my husband. She had worked with him. The $28 million hadn't appeared by accident. She had helped him hide it. For a long time I just sat there, staring at her face on the glowing screen. She was beautiful in that poised, ageless way, shoulders straight, eyes cool, mouth neither smiling nor frowning but resting in perfect composure. She didn't look like a woman who stumbled into other people's secrets. She looked like a woman who curated them. And suddenly, I was certain, Clara Bounce knew about the fortune. The question was, did she know I knew? Sleep was impossible. I tossed, I turned, and finally I gave up altogether. I padded downstairs in my robe and poured myself a glass of wine. The house creaked in the darkness, the refrigerator humming like a low secret. I set the glass on the counter and opened the safe again. The papers seemed heavier now, as though they carried not just ink but intent. One envelope stood out. Thick. Cream-colored. Addressed not to me, but to him. And inside, more papers, yes, but also a single folded note. My heart hammered as I unfolded it. The handwriting was elegant, unfamiliar. You must move faster. They will start asking questions. I've done what I can to keep things hidden, but the longer you wait, the more dangerous it becomes. No signature. No date. But I didn't need either. I knew. It was Clara. The glass of wine sat untouched as I pressed the note to the counter, my mind racing. Faster? Dangerous. Hidden. This wasn't just about money. It was about something else, something larger, something riskier. My husband hadn't merely saved, he had concealed. And Clara had been his accomplice. The weight of the silence I had carried at the funeral shifted inside me. It was no longer just grief or secrecy, it was suspicion. And beneath that suspicion, a quiet fear. Because if Clara had warned him of danger, what did that mean for me? The next day, I decided to test the waters. I dressed carefully, not in morning black, but in a navy dress that spoke of composure rather than despair. I wanted control, not pity. And then I drove. Not to her office, not yet, but to the cafe across the street from it. A place where I could watch unseen. Her firm's building was sleek, glass catching the afternoon light like a blade. People flowed in and out, purposeful, hurried. And then, around 2 o'clock, she appeared. Clara. Even from across the street, she carried herself with quiet authority. She spoke to no one, her phone pressed to her ear, her expression unreadable. She crossed the street, entered the cafe, ordered something, and sat alone by the window. I watched her lift her cup, stir, sip. Every movement deliberate. And I thought, she knows something I don't. She always has. When I finally returned home, exhaustion crashed over me. But beneath it, determination sparked. Clara Bounce was no longer just a name in the margins. She was a thread. And if I pulled it carefully enough, perhaps the entire web of secrets would unravel. But I had to be careful, because threads can also be traps. And something told me Clara wasn't a woman you could tug without consequence. That night, as I lay in bed, the silence pressed close again. But this time, it wasn't the silence of grief. It was the silence before a storm. The storm didn't wait for the sky. It lived inside me now, rattling my bones, sharpening every breath, turning silence into thunder. I woke before dawn, my dreams shattered into fragments of voices I couldn't place. The grandfather clock downstairs ticked its steady rhythm, but it no longer suited me. Each tick was not comfort. Each tick was countdown. Countdown to what? Exposure? Betrayal? Or the truth I wasn't sure I wanted? When I rose from bed, I already knew what I would do. The office smelled the same as before, dust, ink, and the faintest ghost of my husband's cologne. I sat at his desk, unlocked the safe again, and spread the documents wide across the wood like a deck of poisoned cards. I wasn't looking for money. Not directly. I was looking for patterns. And they were there. The papers formed a web, threads looping across the globe, numbers, transfers, offshore accounts, shell corporations with names so bland they almost begged to be ignored. But through them ran a pulse. A watermark. A shadow signature. Clara Bounce. Her name again and again. Not boldly, but slyly. Handwritten in margins. Buried in footnotes. Circled once, almost reverently, like someone marking the queen on a chessboard. But she wasn't alone. 3 other names emerged, scribbled in my husband's steady hand. Not companies. Not places. People. R. Bennett. M. Castillo. H. Dreyer. Each one linked, always, to Clara. Who were they? Allies? Enemies? Pawns or predators? The further I traced, the less this resembled financial planning and the more it looked like military strategy, layers of concealment, redirection, fallback positions. My husband hadn't been saving for us. He had been hiding. The realization curdled in my chest. All those years at the dinner table, his steady gaze, his questions about the children, his quiet nods when I spoke of the garden. Were those moments real, or were they camouflage? Was I just a cover for his double life? The letter ID found from Clara whispered through me, "They will start asking questions. Dangerous. Move faster." Who were they? And had his death been natural or necessary? I needed distance. Perspective. And so, against every instinct to remain invisible, I returned to the cafe. It was a foolish risk. But sometimes safety blinds you, while danger sharpens your sight. The cafe buzzed with midday life, students tapping at laptops, businessmen bending over mugs, couples whispering in corners. I chose a seat at the far end, where I could see the door without being seen. I didn't wait long. At exactly 1:32, she arrived. Clara Vance. The bell above the door chimed as she entered. Her heels struck the floor like punctuation marks. Her coat was cut sharp, her face perfectly composed, her eyes unreadable as ever. She ordered tea. She sat by the window. But this time, she wasn't alone. A man slid into the seat across from her. Recognition hit me like ice water. I knew that face, not from life, but from the files in the safe. R. Bennett. I forced myself to look down at my cup, to stir it slowly, though my hands trembled so violently I nearly spilled. My ears strained, but the clatter of dishes drowned their voices. Still, I could see. Clara leaned forward, her fingers laced tightly. Bennett listened, his jaw clenched, his head shaking once, sharply. Then she slid something across the table, an envelope. He hesitated only a moment before tucking it inside his coat. And then he was gone. Clara remained, sipping her tea as though nothing had transpired. And then she too disappeared into the street. I stayed frozen long after. My tea was cold. My pulse wasn't. Whatever this was, it was larger than inheritance, larger than grief. Clara wasn't just managing money. She was orchestrating people, pieces on a board I didn't yet understand. And my husband had been one of them. That night, I tore through the office again. Every drawer, every file, every corner. And at the bottom of one drawer, beneath an old ledger, I found it. A cassette tape. Dusty. Unlabeled. Out of place. My breath caught. My husband hadn't used tapes in decades. He was a man of encrypted drives, not analog relics. Which meant this one mattered. I hunted through the attic until I unearthed the old player. My hand shook as I pressed play. For a moment, only static. Then, my love. I froze. It was him. My husband. His voice spilling from the machine like a ghost refusing burial. If you found this, it means something has gone wrong. Clara has the details. Trust her. She knows what's at stake. I stopped breathing. His voice cracked when it returned. There are things I never told you. Not to protect myself, but to protect you. If they knew what you knew, if they knew who you really were, they would come for you first. Forgive me. I thought I could finish this before time ran out. But if you're hearing this, time has already betrayed us both. The tape clicked, hissed, ended. I sat in the dark, silence roaring in my ears. If they knew who you really were. The words clung like a curse. Who was I, other than his wife, the mother of his children? Why would knowing me put me in danger? Unless my life had never been mine at all. Unless he had married me not in spite of who I was, but because of it. The next morning, the mirror startled me. Bloodshot eyes. Tangled hair. Skin pale as parchment. Was I losing myself or uncovering someone I had never known? I wanted to storm Claire's office, slam the tape down, and demand answers. But instinct stopped me. That was what she would expect. Instead, I chose patience. Observation. I watched. Claire's life was neat, precise. Office in the morning. Lunch at the cafe. Meetings with Castillo, with Dreyer. Money and power orbiting her like planets around the sun. But twice, I saw something different. Late at night, long after her office should have dimmed, she met someone else. Not in cafes. Not in offices. In unmarked cars, parked in shadows. The man was tall, his face hidden, his movements deliberate. Both times, Clara gave him something, a folder, a flash drive. He gave her nothing. In return, transactions without reciprocity. The most dangerous kind. Each step deeper pulled me tighter into the same net my husband had inhabited. And the question sharpened, had he really died of natural causes? Or had Clara decided his time was up? The final clue came by accident. While combing through the safe again, I found another note tucked between contracts. Unlike the first, this one was addressed to me. If you are reading this, do not trust Clara completely. She will help you, but only as long as it helps herself. Watch her. Watch everyone. And remember, our son must never know. Our son. The words cut deeper than any. Why not him? Why protect him or exclude him? Why treat him as danger rather than family? And why did my husband's warnings sound less like those of a husband and more like dispatches from a battlefield? I sank into his leather chair, holding both notes, the unsigned one from Clara, urging him to move faster, and the one from him, urging me to beware her. Who was telling the truth? Who was playing me? And worst of all, had I already chosen the wrong side? That night, unable to bear the silence, I replayed the tape. His voice filled the room again, tender, urgent. My love, if they knew who you really were. I pressed pause. My whisper cracked the darkness. Who am I? The walls gave no answer. But somewhere, I knew, Clara Vance had one. And one day soon, I would make her tell me. The rain didn't just fall that night, it stopped the windows, long claws of water scratching at the glass like something trying to get in. Sleep was impossible. But then, sleep hadn't truly belonged to me in weeks. The first tape hadn't just unsettled me, it had unstitched me. Every time I closed my eyes, his voice returned. My husband's voice, speaking from beyond the grave, whispering secrets I was never meant to hold. If they knew who you really were. That single phrase haunted me like a curse. Who was I? Who had he believed me to be? The storm dragged me downstairs. Restless, shoving me toward his office again, because where else could I go? His ghost still lived there, in those folders, those drawers, those safes that seemed bottomless with hidden truths. I thought I had gone through them all. But storms shake loose what calm days bury. That night, a drawer stuck. I pulled harder. Wood scraped. And then, shift. A false panel no bigger than my hand slid out of place. My heart stuttered. Behind it lay another cassette tape. Unlabeled. Just like the first. I didn't even hesitate. My fingers trembled so violently I nearly dropped it into the player. Static hissed. Then his voice again. But this time, not gentle. Not tender. Not the husband I remembered. Listen to me carefully. If you found the second tape, it means the first wasn't enough. It means you still don't understand the danger you're in. My breath froze. You must not trust Clara completely. She will protect you only if it serves her. But if she ever suspects she knows more than you should, she will remove you. Do you understand? She will remove you. The words sliced through the dark like a knife pressed against my throat. I wanted to tell you everything. God, I wanted to. But they were watching. Always watching. Even in our home. Even at the dinner table. If I told you the truth, you would have been the first target. And I couldn't. I couldn't let that happen. His voice cracked. Broke into silence. Then, if you want the whole story, find Dreyer. He has the final piece. But be careful. Dreyer doesn't forgive, and he doesn't forget. Click. End. I clapped a hand over my mouth. Dreyer. The name I had seen tied to Clara. But why him? Why not Clara directly? And why would my husband, so meticulous, so cautious, leave me a trail pointing to a man he described as dangerous? Unless he knew I had no other choice. The storm outside screamed, rattling the glass like a warning. I hit rewind, played it again. Every syllable carved deeper into me. He hadn't sounded afraid for himself. Had sounded afraid for me. He had lived with this terror for years, smiling across the breakfast table, holding my hand at night, while enemies prowled in the shadows of our very home. And I had never noticed. By dawn, I knew what I had to do. I had to find Dreyer. But how? Clara. Always Clara. I returned to the cafe, the same table, the same vantage point. And just as before, Clara appeared, a metronome of routine. But this time, she wasn't alone. Not Bennett. Not Castillo. Dreyer. The name from the tape. Older than I expected. Silver at the temples. A suit sharp enough to cut. His eyes scanned the room like a predator, lingering too long on shadows. Clara slid him a folder. He pocketed it without opening. His lips moved once, short, final. And then he left. The instant the door shut, Clara's mask cracked. Her fingers shook around her teacup. And for the first time since I had begun following her, I saw it, fear. What kind of man frightened Clara Vance? That night I lay awake, Dreyer's face burned into my mind. If you want the whole story, find Dreyer. But how could I? If Clara herself trembled before him, what chance did I have? Unless fear was the only weapon I had left. The next day, reckless, trembling, I followed Clara's car. She drove carefully, like she knew the world was watching. She turned down into an industrial graveyard of warehouses, where the city forgets people. I parked far back, pulse screaming in my throat. She slipped into a gray building with rusted doors. Minutes later, another car. Sleek. Black. Dreyer's. I watched shadows move behind grimy windows, my imagination painting the rest. Deal struck. Threats whispered. Secrets exchanged. By the time I drove home, one thought chilled me to the bone. I wasn't just watching anymore. I was inside the game. Back in his office, I replayed the second tape until my ears rang with his voice. Do not trust Clara completely. Dreyer has the final piece. They will remove you. The tape stopped. The silence pressed in. What do? I do? I whispered. No answer. Just the storm outside, snarling. But my gut spoke. If Clara only protected me when it served her, then I had to make myself useful. I had to step willingly into the shadows before they swallowed me whole. The next morning, I did something unthinkable. I walked into Clara's office. Unannounced. She looked up. Startled. For once, her composure cracked. You shouldn't be here, she snapped. No, I said, sliding the second tape across her desk. But here I am. Her color drained. Her fingers hovered over the cassette like it was a live grenade. Where did you find this? You know where. Her jaw clenched. You don't understand what you're holding. Then make me understand. For a long beat, silence. Then slowly, carefully, she leaned forward, voice low, then I'm threaded through it. You think your husband was an innocent man. He wasn't. He was in deep, deeper than you can imagine. And now, whether you like it or not, you are too. Her words seeped into me like poison. And the worst part? I believed her. That night, with the storm clawing the house apart, a question gnawed at me harder than all the rest. If my husband had lied to me, if Clara was entangled, if Dreyer held the final piece, then what foundation was I standing on? A fortune? A grave? Or a battlefield waiting for my blood? And as the thunder rolled, I whispered the question I dreaded most. Had my husband trusted the wrong people? Or had I married the wrong man? I used to believe the truth was like water. No matter how many rocks you piled on top of it, no matter how deep you buried it, eventually it would seep through, clawing its way back into the light. But now I knew better. Lies weren't just obstacles. Lies could be woven like silk threads in a spider's web, so tight, so artful, that by the time the truth emerged, it was already deadly. And that's exactly what I discovered after my son turned me away. After his wife coiled tighter around him, I'd be strangling a weakening tree. The night he shut the door on me still echoes in my bones. His voice, cold, distant, final. Mom, this is our family now. You don't fit into it. Those were words of rejection. They were words of execution. But I didn't vanish. I lingered at the edges of their carefully painted life, watching, collecting, and slowly I began to see the fractures. The curated smiles, the polished veneer, they were a mask. And my plan, my quiet, dangerous plan, shifted from survival to justice. At first, I thought it was only my bitterness speaking. Alone in my rented room, staring up at the water-stained ceiling, I wondered if maybe he had been right. Maybe I really was a burden. Maybe his new family really was better, brighter, more deserving. But then came the phone calls. Mrs. Collins, a neighbor of theirs, phoned one evening. Her voice trembled like dry leaves in a storm. "I probably shouldn't tell you this," she whispered, "but people have been coming around. Shady people. Asking about money. Money." The word ricocheted in my skull. What money? I had given them everything, my time, my loyalty, my love. But had my son stumbled into something darker, something his wife had pulled him into? The cracks widened with every detail. My daughter-in-law wasn't just possessive, she was secretive. She cut him off from his old friends, from colleagues, even from the church pews he once filled beside me. She insisted on handling all finances. And now strangers were prowling at night, sniffing for debt. Something was terribly wrong, and I was going to uncover it. They thought discarding me made me powerless. What they didn't realize is that invisibility is its own weapon. When nobody watches you, nobody guards against you. I started small. A conversation at the bank where my son used to keep his accounts. The clerk wouldn't say much, confidentiality, of course, but one careless slip was enough. "Oh, Mrs. Thompson? Your son's wife is one of our most active clients. Always moving funds around. Large withdrawals. Frequent transfers overseas." Overseas. The word lodged in my throat like a shard of ice. Why would she be funneling money out of the country? I didn't confront my son. Not yet. I needed more. Fate delivered it. One Sunday afternoon, he left his laptop at a cafe. The young barista recognized me. People still remembered my face, even if my son had erased me from his and pressed it into my hands. I knew it was wrong. I knew it was trespass. But what mother wouldn't? No password. Careless. Not like him. And what I found curdled my stomach. Dozens of emails. Between his wife and a man whose name I didn't know. Phrases wrapped in code but not careful enough. The money will be in by Thursday. He doesn't suspect anything. Once it's done, we'll be free. He doesn't suspect anything. Was he my son? I couldn't go to him outright. He had chosen her already. Had seen me as a jealous relic, desperate for relevance. So I planted doubts, subtle, poisonous doubts. A question here. A slight comment there. "Oh, darling, working late again? She must miss you dreadfully." Or, strange how she always has new jewelry. She must be a magician with the budget. Little hooks designed not to accuse, but to fester. And I saw it, flickers in his eyes. A pause too long. A shadow of doubt creeping in. But she wasn't oblivious. My daughter-in-law felt the shift. She clung tighter, laughed louder, filled every silence with her voice. And when I finally earned an invitation to dinner after months of exile, she cornered me in the kitchen. Her eyes glittered with fire. "I know what you're trying to do," she hissed. I met her gaze, steady. "Do you?" My voice was soft, almost kind. "Or are you just afraid I already know?" Her lips pressed thin. Her hand trembled on the stem of her wine glass. And in that moment, her mask slipped. She was afraid. Storms don't arrive in a single bolt. They gather, whispering across the horizon, swelling until they break. This one was building fast. Whispers spread about unpaid bills, about sudden deaths. Despite their glittering lifestyle, A friend mentioned seeing her in a car with a strange man, voices raised in harsh argument. Was she drowning in trouble? Or was she the storm itself? And where, in all this, did my son stand? Mastermind? Accomplice? Pawn? The more I uncovered, the clearer it became he wasn't the spider. He was the fly. And mothers? We don't let our children get caught in webs. Not without a fight. That night, in my small room, I laid it all out. Printed emails, scribbled notes, testimonies, bank trails, each thread glistening under the lamplight like strands of a spider's web. And at the center, her. Always her. The question clawed at me until I whispered it aloud. Was my son complicit? Or just blind? I didn't know. But I knew this. My plan was no longer about survival. It was about protecting him. Even if it meant tearing his world apart. Even if it meant tearing myself apart. Because here's the thing about lies. They're fragile. One wrong step, one slip of the tongue, and they collapse. And when they collapse, they don't just fall, they crush everyone underneath. I was ready to pull the first thread, but I didn't yet understand how deep her deception ran, or how dangerous the unraveling would become once the web began to tear. The thing about webs of lies is simple. Once you tug at one thread, the entire structure begins to tremble. But what happens when the spider itself realizes you're the one pulling? That was the danger I now faced. I had gathered evidence, planted doubt, and watched as cracks appeared in their perfect facade. Yet even I wasn't prepared for how quickly the truth would come crashing down, or how deep the damage would cut. It began with a single call. My son's voice on the other end sounded different, softer, frayed around the edges. "Mom, can you come by on Sunday? Dinner? Just us. Please. Just us." The words pierced me. For a flicker of a moment, it was as if time bent back to scraped knees, bedtime stories, birthdays lit with candles, and laughter. But I had lived long enough to know better than to trust appearances. If you wanted me there, it was for a reason. And I had one of my own. I wouldn't be coming empty-handed. On the day of the dinner, I slid a folder into my handbag, my weapon. Emails, transaction logs, messages. Pages sharp as knives, truths heavy as stones. But truth, if thrown carelessly, can wound the wrong person. My son was already fragile. A direct attack would only drive him deeper into her shadow. No, I wouldn't accuse. I would question. Plant seeds. Let the soil of doubt do the work. Because if he unearthed the truth himself, he wouldn't be able to deny it. The air inside their house was thick, suffocating. My son's smile was tight, rehearsed. His wife hovered like smoke, clinging, unshakable. We sat, 3 bodies, 1 battlefield. Roast chicken steamed between us, garlic potatoes wafting. But none of it mattered. The food was a stage prop in a play already set. And then he broke the silence. "Mom, she says you've been interfering. Digging into things that aren't your concern. So this was no reunion. It was an ambush." I forced a small smile. Interfering? Or noticing? There's a difference. Her fork clattered against porcelain. "You're trying to destroy us." Her voice cracked. Anger? Fear? Both? And that was when I knew. She was slipping. "Destroy you?" I tilted forward. Why would I bother, unless there was something worth hiding? Her face strained. My son's eyes darted, suspicion creeping in. That was my opening. I reached into my bag and slid out 1 sheet. Not the whole arsenal, just 1 weapon. A record of a transfer, money funneled across borders. "Recognize this?" I asked, calm but sharp. Her mouth opened, but no sound emerged. My son snatched the paper, scanning it with trembling hands. "What is this?" "Something I stumbled upon," I said softly. "And there's more. But maybe it would mean more, she explained. Silence. Silence sharp enough to cut flesh. Finally, she cracked. But not the way I expected. You don't understand, she whispered, tears breaking free. It wasn't supposed to go this far. My son's voice faltered. Go? How far? It started with debts, she confessed. Just debts. I had to cover them. But then they came. They wanted more. And if I didn't keep moving the money, her breath hitched. They said they'd hurt us. Hurt you. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just greed. It was blackmail. A trap bigger than I had imagined. But before pity could take root, her fury turned on me. You. This is your fault. If you'd stayed away, none of this would have unraveled. My son froze, his world tilting, his eyes flicking between us, between lies and truth. The scales were shifting. For the first time, he didn't defend her. Instead, he whispered, almost to himself, how much of our life was even real. She reached for him. He pulled back. That single gesture thundered louder than words. His gaze locked onto me. Raw. Desperate. Shattered. Mom, what do we do? The boy who once turned away had finally turned back. I had dreamed of this moment, of him returning, seeking me. Yet it didn't feel like victory. It felt like standing at the lip of a canyon, with all of us dangling over the edge. I could end it. Call the police. Expose her. Watch everything crash down. Or I could shield him. He was still my son. But how do you protect someone from the person they chose over you? I didn't have to choose. Fate chose for me. A knock rattled the door. Hard. Relentless. Her face turned ghostly. It's them, she whispered. My son frowned. Who? Before she could answer, the door burst. 2 men. Dark suits. Cold eyes. We've come for what's ours, one growled. Chaos ignited. My son shouted. She pleaded. And me? My hand clenched around my bag. The folder weighed like a stone. This wasn't family drama anymore. This was survival. They underestimated me. Everyone always had. Years of silence sharpen you like a blade. While the men barked threats, I slid my phone from my bag. A silent tap. Recorder on. Another 911 dialed, waiting. Then I lifted my voice. Calm. Steele. Gentlemen. If you want proof she's been moving your money, I have it. Right here. The folder flashed in my hand. Their eyes snapped to me. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. The next minutes were madness. Shouts. A scuffle. My son stepping in front of me. Sirens growing closer. And then, the crash of law against crime. Police stormed the house. Handcuffs. Screams. Silence. By the end, his wife was sobbing, the man dragged away. And my son clutched my hand like a child again. In that wreckage, truth stood bare. Not revenge. Not triumph. Just truth. Weeks blurred into interrogations, trials, headlines. Her secrets unraveled in public. She wasn't just drowning in debt. She had been tethered to a laundering web, each thread a chain. My son had been her shield, her excuse, her puppet. But not anymore. For the first time in years, he came home. Not the boy I raised, not the man who betrayed me, but something in between. Someone rebuilding. We sat together one evening, the sunset burning gold. He whispered, I'm sorry, Mom. I forgot who you really were. I squeezed his hand. And who's that? His lips curved into a fragile smile. The one who never gave up. Even when I gave up on you. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. It looks like surviving, like holding on to truth when everything else collapses. My son had abandoned me, replaced me, broken me. But when the walls fell, it was me who stood. And that had been my secret plan all along. Not revenge, not victory, but salvation. Even if it meant saving him from himself.